Hi folks, Dave Thompson here with two guys that aren't strangers to many of us out there, Vince Leonard and Rob Norberg. I appreciate you guys' time today. This is just a focused segment, guys, on uninsured motorists for a new class that I'm doing. We met in December for about a half an hour. So today's topic is nothing but UM. And you're hard pressed to find three guys more involved with UM than we are. So Rob, let me start with you from the agency side. What's your basic approach to UM and customers? How do you handle it?
Well, basically we solicit and sell UM to every single customer. We always offer it. It is the most important and most misunderstood coverage out there, we find, for the consumer. So it's such a valuable piece of coverage that we say we're going to put it on everybody. You
were just on TV a couple weeks ago about this very issue. A lady was injured and no liability, and she had rejected UM.
Yeah, and if she had had UM, she wouldn't have been on TV, and she wouldn't have been having attorneys after her.
Well, what about in your agency, Rob? Do you guys and girls always quote UM equal to BI at a stack limit?
Yeah, since we came to the table a few years ago with Dave's training there, we do 100% of the time. We quote UM stacked, same as BI, and we always have those documents in file.
So you save that quote itself?
Save the quote, and we rarely have many rejections anymore, but if they do reject, we've got those forms to show it.
You had said earlier when we sat here a year or so ago that when somebody doesn't want to take UM equal to BI stack, you said, we make it tough. What do you mean by that?
Well, we're going to tell them all the benefits. We're going to tell them we're going to break it down in a cost way that they can understand it and say, hey, for a few dollars a day, less than your cup of coffee, you can have these great coverages. And I think it's very important for people to understand the coverages on the policy, because that's what they're missing.
Do you provide any other documentation to them besides the quote and the form they have to sign? Any other written documentation, or is this verbal with your staff saying you ought to have this?
Yeah, most of it's verbal, but however, we do access the FAIA site a lot for a lot of those documents that are there. Things that you've put out in the education library is very valuable for people to understand. So I think it's important to give them as much knowledge as they can get.
Vince, you've heard Rob's approach to this. From the plaintiff side, the big joke, folks, is we try to make Vince go away.
That's right. Keep him out of our office.
Yeah. But based on what Rob has told us, what are your thoughts and observations about how he approaches the UM issue?
It's the thing that I've said a million times. I want this to dry up from my standpoint. There's plenty of wrongs to right. This is an area, frankly, that should not be something the legal community should have to fight over. And you just hear his philosophy, and it's frustrating because I wish many of my clients were in his hands, because we're seeing sometimes things different than that. That's not the philosophy. In fact, we see sometimes where it's just the opposite. Rob's talking about it's tough not to accept it. I see a lot of times with my clients, it's tough for them to get it. It's almost they're fighting a slant that starts off with a predisposition not to get it, and they almost have to scrap and claw to get it. So I hope that people are looking at your material, watching this. And I've had a conversation recently with an agent, and when you start off with the premise that you don't think it's a good coverage, that's one thing to say, hey, you can't afford it, and we all have to make tough business decisions with our... But if you start off with somebody saying, hey, even if you had the money, you don't want this, that's where I have a bone to pick. That concerns me that somebody philosophically would start off. I mean, you think about it, I have people who buy $100,000 in BI and frankly have very little assets to protect. Uninsured motorists is probably the most likely thing that you're putting premium out, that it might actually help you and your family. So boy, if you were going to skimp, it seems odd that you would choose to skimp on yourself.
We'll come back and talk about the form itself. You call it the rejection slip. But kind of along your alley there, what happens, I don't have the email with me, but 6 months ago an agent like Rob sent me an email, said, you'll find this amusing. And this customer was trying to be picked off by another agent across town. And she sent him, the new agent, her deck page, and the first line was, "I definitely want to carry UM." And then he wrote back, I have the email, that said UM only covers medical bills, you have Medicare and a Medicare supplement and PIP. You would never collect on UM. I recommend that you reject the coverage. Now, she's got the form signed there, Vince, but that case comes to you with that email from the agent. Does that give you legs to run with?
Not only does it give us legs to run with, I've had that circumstance. And I'm certainly not here to help agents, but gosh, it's one thing to misunderstand the coverage. It's one thing to understand the coverage and come up with a wrong analysis. But it's another thing to do all of those and then put it in writing. Because that is, you know, from my standpoint, where people say to me, well, how do you get around a rejection slip? There is the context. It's rebuttable on both sides if you don't have it and you do have it. But when you look at the context and when somebody's got their thumb on the scale to give somebody the wrong advice and they make that decision based on the wrong advice, absolutely, those are cases we take. And frankly, when you get a good defense attorney and they see that evidence, most of those cases you will not hear say, well, show me the case, show me the opinion. You won't find one because they get settled. That's why there's no opinion on it.
So if we had, you know, our defense guys, Dan Brito and Steve Chaplin, you guys know them, and our folks out there know them too. If Dan's sitting right there, or Steve's sitting right there, wouldn't they probably say that's tough for me to defend? It might just get settled by the carrier with without paying these guys.
And I have friends on both sides of the fence, and you know what they're wanting to do for the insurance industry, and as they are, and I think sometimes they get a bad rap. They get called chicken, or you don't want to fight Cersei Denny. What they're wanting to do is not create a bad law. They don't want a bad poster child, and that's a bad poster child. And what they're telling people is, when you have these fact sets, bad fact sets create bad law. And so a good defense attorney is going to say, listen, this is not good. These are the things that you want to resolve. And typically we see they want them resolved and they want the old confidentiality. They want to bury that stuff and they don't want it to come into the public eye.
Right. One other question, I'm going to let you guys wind it up. The form itself, Vince, Rob could tell us that many of his companies tell him, you get the form signed and you keep it, we don't need it until the loss takes place. So when the carrier goes to Rob and says, produce the form to show no coverage, and he hasn't got it and there's no form, is that shooting fish in a barrel for you? Does the companies have to pay that, or is that defensible?
Listen, everything's defensible. All I can say is from a practical standpoint on both sides, both when I was within the insurance industry and now on this side, I have never had a case when there was a missing rejection form where the carrier and or the agent's carrier didn't pay. So that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. All I can tell you is in 30 years, I've never seen someone wiggle out of that. I'm sure there's a Houdini out there. I just haven't met him yet.
So that form is golden, really, for his side, right?
I mean, we requested on our side for the same reason that you wanted on your side. What we're hoping is that it doesn't exist. I'm just going to be blunt. We're asking for it. It's not because I'm really interested in seeing it. It's because I'm hoping you can't produce it. And then if you produce it, I'm going to look at it. Like, what's the date of it? We just had a case recently where they produced a wonderful rejection form. It was perfect. Unfortunately, it was signed after the date of loss. Now, they didn't happen to mention to us, but I had a good lawyer who said, hey, wait a second, this is after the date of loss. Is that an issue? I'm like, oh, that's a big issue. Yeah, well, so winner, chicken dinner, let's just say they rolled on coverage. But if on our side, that's why we have to look and make sure it's proper, the right signature, the spelling's right, the date's right, all of those things.
The customer's name is spelled correctly.
Yeah, but we have that one. I think I talked about that. I had it when they misspelled the name. Yeah, that's a no-no. And
that's $1 million UM claim, and I knew the defense lady who handled that.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, gosh, practice.
We're going to wrap this up because we've got to go next door and eat Park Avenue barbecue if you guys are in. Rob, just some parting comments to the folks. I mean, you're in the trenches. What could you tell the folks watching you about UM?
Basically, if you just adopt the policy like we have to quote it, sell it, make sure everybody knows about it on every single sale, you will find that it becomes a great sale and it pushes up your premium dollars, which is what most of the agents want to do. But if you offer it, it's not that much money on every single one. So offer it up front, and just make sure you can explain it to the people when it comes time for that question. But it is a valuable coverage, and you'll find it is easy to sell.
Vets, 15, 20 seconds of
Yeah.
the world according to vets.
Well, you know, sometimes I'm sure you guys look at me and you probably have your days you want to shake your fist like Snoopy and Red Baron. But, you know, you want me out there. Because when you're doing it right, you want somebody out there calling these agents that are doing it wrong, so you're on a fair competitive deal. So if some insurance company out there is telling their insureds, hey, you don't need stacking UM, you just need UM on one of your 4 cars so they can quote it cheaper than you as an independent agent, you want me calling them on that. So look at me as a person that, hey, if you're doing it right, I'm your best friend. But if your competitor's doing it wrong, you want somebody making them held to account so that you can compete fairly in the marketplace.